Hello and welcome to week 20 of the Stitch 22 project. This week I'm going to show you a method of stitching called seeding, where it's the whole surface, your design, is constructed of lots of tiny little stitches, and they're quite random stitches, but they're straight, they're plain, and they're a sprinkling of stitching, a bit like I don't know where the word seeding comes from. It's quite an interesting word, and here we have another example. Now I thought it'd be quite fun to base our stitching on an actual study, and here I've got this little pair of embroidery scissors, and I've drawn round the scissors on the fabric, straight onto the fabric, using a blue marker pen which is removable with water. So if I just draw that shape on for you there, and then I'll show you, just to reassure you that the water then makes it disappear. So I hope you can see that is now disappeared, a little experiment. Okay, so that is really brilliant on plain fabrics. And the disadvantage of using a printed or highly textured fabric is that perhaps you can't see these tiny little seedings. So what I'm going to suggest you do is that you take a little fragment of the fabric that you've been working on all these weeks, and that you place it down on your fabric, on a plain fabric, I beg your pardon, and tack it down, just as I have with this piece here, and then extend the pattern outwards into the plain fabric with seeding. So here's one possible, and here's another little bit of fabric which I actually use as an example. So here, so this is it's tacked down, the tacking has come out. I've taken the tacking out, and I have extended the stitching beyond the print. So it goes into the plain fabric with the tiny stitching. And you can see on the black areas I've used a black thread, and on the blue, and there's a yellow and an orange. So I've had fun with extending that pattern out and almost inventing the pattern beyond it. Something else you might find fun to do is to rip a piece of newspaper headline, anything, a fragment like that, say with nice big bold lettering, tack it onto your plainer fabric. You can see the tacking stitches still in there at the moment, and then draw on the words or the letter shapes onto the plain fabric, or make them up, or do whatever you like and have a bit of fun, and then extend the fill the shapes in with this very fine seeding. I hope you can see that. The one little method I thought would be quite good fun if you quite like to use a plain fabric is to place a shape. So if you're going to use the scissors or the buttons that I've got here, or something very simple, I mean it could be a buckle, so you can have a look, hunt around the house and see interesting shapes that you might like to draw. So you would then place them on the fabric, on the plain fabric, hold them down quite firmly, and then with your blue fabric marker pen, the water soluble one, there is an air soluble one, but unless you're going to stitch very, very quickly, I would suggest that you get the water-soluble one. So I'm just drawing that on there, so just giving you an idea of how it's starting. Now I'm going to stitch onto a much larger piece of fabric with larger stitches, just to demonstrate the stitch itself, so that it's not too hard on the eyes for you. And I've drawn a simple little square shape on this piece of plain fabric. I don't know whether I hope you can see it, but the seeding stitch itself is just a very, very simple stitch. Nothing difficult about that. But believe it or not, it is very challenging to stitch, to cover an area with little stitches and to try to not line them up in any way whatsoever. And it is a most therapeutic movement for your eye. And my little tip is to, instead of starting close to the stitches, is to stitch, bring your needle up away from the stitches and work back into a little gap, as it were. I think I've punctured my knot there. So if I'm going to come up here, a lot of the time you can come and go and go in and out in one movement if you like, but I quite like it being an in and out as a separate movement. Now remember, you're trying to make it look as if it's very random, so you're not lining it up with the previous stitches, and that is where you're going to challenge yourself. So bring the needle out away from the little gap, so that the needle can then find the gap more easily to go down than come up. Can you see what I mean? So if I came up here, and I'll go down. I hope my fingers are allowing you to see what I'm doing here. So a little area of random, so-called random, there's a little gap there. I just tempted really to fill it in. Go up onto the blue edge and then come back into the stitching, so that you're starting to block that little shape in and form the corner of this rectangle which I've drawn. That's your aim, to texturize, if you like, or fill. It's a filling stitch. So you're actually creating a shape. So the beginning of a square shape starting to happen there. So if we look at these little the button images, I hope you can see I've got a light cast onto this. I hope you can see a shadow which is cast. I'm going to use my paintbrush to point it out. A shadow around the button, and a lovely indentation of shading around the indent there, around the holes. On this little button too, there's a shadow there. So that's what I'm trying to copy with the, or create with the stitching. So it's not just a simple circle. The blue line, by the way, has been removed from this. And the scissors too. So I put the scissors just on top of it. I just placed it like that. There we are. And then if I move it over, I hope you can see some shadow. Now I've moved my hand away, around the scissors, which I'm picking up on the stitching. So it's really great. It's a discovery of fun, really. So remember that you can take a scrap of a newspaper or a magazine or one of your own painted decorated papers, rip a fragment of it, touch it, stitch it down with tacking, and then extend the pattern out with stitching using your seeding, any different colours that you like. So here's the one that I showed you earlier, where the little printed fabric was placed down and the shapes of the design of the fabric were extended outwards. So I hope you have fun with seeding. So week 20, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday for the next week and the next stitch adventure. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.